Greetings, everybody, and welcome. My name is Chris Chapman. I'm president and CEO, co-founder of Kingmakers of Oakland. I want to welcome you to the United for Black Educators nonprofit sustainability for Black leadership. I would like to give my co-facilitator an opportunity to introduce himself, and then I'll continue.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Brother Chris. My name is Randy Suraguchi Jr., and I'm the Executive Director of Urban Ed Academy. Very excited to talk about today's topic.
Excellent. Thank you, Brother Randy. Looking forward to listening and learning from you, King. If we can go to the next slide, please. So in order to make this possible, y'all, we are living in extraordinary times, and our only way through this moment really is through collaboration and support. So we want to start off with tremendous thank you to the executive leadership of Sister Ayana and Generation Thrive, her support team of Annalise and Ideal, Urban Ed Academy, and the extraordinary work that they are doing in San Francisco around recruiting, training, and retaining Black male teachers. We want to thank the Golden State Warriors, Kaiser Permanente, who continues to allow us to thrive, and our organization, Kingmakers of Oakland. Next slide, please.
So just to give you a quick roadmap of the hour we have together today, we've been trying to keep them relatively tight, and last one went really well. We just kind of have a four-part split here. We're going to have a quick poll to open up just to check to see who's in the room around this webinar's topic. We want to know mainly about what folks' temperature or awareness is of the state of African-American led organizations and companies during this pandemic. We'll talk a little bit about Urban Ed Academy's work with what we're doing at the intersection of education and housing. And so you all should see the poll up there now as I go. We'll then pivot over to a quick panel conversation to talk more about our strategy and some of the success we've had in maintaining through this pandemic. And then I will hand it back over to Brother Chris for him to share about the successes they've had with Kingmakers of Oakland. And then if we move to the next slide, the two questions you'll see there also on your poll. And so I'll just read those out while we are getting folks to complete them. First question, do you know of a Black-led organization or company sustaining through the pandemic? This is just a quick yes or no. We want to get a sense of the level of awareness of where folks are at in understanding this particular niche of nonprofit leadership out there. And then the second question is the flip, the B side of that question. Do you know of a Black-led organization or company that has dissolved during the pandemic? And so this is a conversation we're having around sustainability, and it cuts both ways, both survival and thriving and dissolution under the circumstances. Next slide, please. Or excuse me, I think we're still waiting for the results here. And we're gonna open up, tease out that this year has obviously not been the easiest, and it is good to see these results. The majority of you here do know folks that are sustaining through, and we see that there is unfortunately a clue there that there are folks that haven't made it, and you see the inverse there on the other side of the question. So it's an interesting way to start out, just to kind of see where folks are at. And this video that we found through CNBC did a really good job of encapsulating what both dynamics look like. The cliff notes on that, y'all, is that this has been a tough year, and folks have needed to get creative and innovative to make sure that we call attention to this issue of Black leadership not having its supports. We always start when we talk about our organization, Urban Ed Academy. Before we go into our panel, I want to talk a little bit about what the work that we're doing and the progress we've made in growing as an organization during this pandemic. It's been rare, but we've been very fortunate to have that story this year. The Warriors Community Foundation has been huge with it, and it's because of this quote here by Frederick Douglass: "It is easier to build strong children than it is to repair broken men. And while interventions and direct service work is important, this strategy of creating a pipeline to success is one that has led us to other opportunities. Next slide, please. This is the challenge that we've seen here on the San Francisco side. While this is one of the wealthiest city and counties in the state, just 3 years ago, this was still the reality that despite all those resources, San Francisco was the worst county for Black student achievement in the state of California. I can tell you that on this next slide, the data has not really gotten that much better. This data is from the 2018-19 school year. And for the kids in our universe, for us, we're based in Bayview Hunters Point. There are about 15,000 children down there. It's one of the most diverse districts in the city. About 4 out of 5 children in San Francisco, no matter what district they're in, about 4 out of 5 Black students are not reading on grade level. It's about 80%, which is bad. And it's terrible for us and our kids and our future. And then 86% of those students are not on grade level in math. So the long and short, we've got tons of work to do. Next slide, please. And here is the way we are going about that work. We started out in 2010 as a Saturday school that matched young Black boys in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade with Black men that look like them around STEM-based experiences. And that's been going great for a while, since 2010. Since 2018, we pivoted into a different strategy, this Man the Bay campaign, a campaign to do what we were doing on Saturdays, but during the week for schools, Monday through Friday. What does it look like to have an African-American male teacher in every elementary school in the city? Well, it requires 2 pieces in the Bay Area: developing these teachers and being able to take a man from start to credential in that teacher pathway. And then on the housing side, we believe proximity matters. And instead of traveling 3 hours a day to get to your job, what if you lived in the neighborhood you taught in? Well, the combination of those things has led to the growth of our fellowship. And we are entering into the 4th cohort year in 2021. Next slide, please. Why do we focus on Black males in schools? Well, there was some recent research. There's anecdotal research that shows representation matters, of course, but there was quantitative research that came out not too long ago by the Urban Institute and some university partners around what it looks like to get a Black male in front of a Black boy before 6th grade as a teacher. And the short answer is that you get a better shot, but the specifics is that you have a 29% increase in interest in pursuing college and a 39% decrease in dropout rate, which with one decision around personnel making, and there are folks on this call that know about finances in schools, that's pretty good. And so for us, it was worth pursuing. Next slide, please. Worth pursuing, making that a possibility citywide. And so here's just a snapshot of what that looks like for us work-wise now. We have a community hub initiative per the city and the mayor's desire. We want to have an option for in-person learning for those students most vulnerable. We also continue our Saturday schoolwork, and that keeps us grounded and tethered to the community. We've grown our team to be able to have a national HBCU strategy for our recruitment. We specifically only go to HBCUs to ensure we have access to Black male candidates, and our local workforce strategy around preparing them and ingratiating them into the neighborhood has been something we've done well with SFUSD and DCYF as partners here in the city. The reparation piece there is sort of where we put our foot in the ground on equity. We know that to make housing real and possible is going to require more resources that we've been able to put out and put into the community. But we were careful about those resources going to Black property owners. And LaShawn Walker, who's been an amazing advocate and supporter of our program, we'll talk a little bit more about that with our Big Picture project. But we have 4 active housing sites, property owner advocacy work, where we are helping African-American homeowners in particular. To the degree this is going to support them, we want to make sure that goes full circle. And we've continued the virtual learning work as everyone else has. And with what I'm going to tell you next, with this building proposition, we have looked into opportunities on research to increase how we fundraise there. Next slide, please. I'm going to go through these next one pretty quickly because I want to make sure we stay on time with our guests. But the big reveal for us is that next year, after going through a crazy 2020, 2021 will be the first year that Urban Ed Academy will purchase real property in the city and county of San Francisco. And it's going to happen at 1676 Newcomb Avenue. This is a quick shot on the left. It was a historic police building. And so there's a lot of irony there for the work that we're doing. And today it doesn't look too much different. And so anyway, this is going to be a work in progress over the next 2 to 3 years, but we're excited to share more. Next slide, please. This is an aerial view of where it's at. And I'm showing you this view because we are taking what was a direct service project, has transformed it into a workforce strategy and a neighborhood development stabilization strategy that we know can't just be contained with us. If this work is truly about uplifting our community, then we have to be talking about the neighborhood. And so what this building acquisition does is it puts us in a position then to start building up the block. How do we work with our partners to do that? And next slide, I'll show you then strategically where we're at. And this is on the 3rd Street corridor in Bayview. We're smack in the middle of where you see all these other yellow dots, smack in the middle where other anchor institutions are located and have been springing up their own efforts through this pandemic. And so we've been blessed to have the right level of supporters around us. Next slide, please. I am so thrilled and honored to be able to introduce LaShawn Walker, the Director of Community Affairs, 5 Point, and Natalie Wilson, an Associate Partner with New Schools Venture Fund. 2 women, African-American women, I like to add personally that I'm proud of, who've helped us write this success story this year. And I want to, before we jump into some quick questions with them, I want to give them a chance to just introduce themselves. Thank you both so much for being with us.
Who would you like to start, Randy?
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. I should be doing the moderator thing and asking directly. LaShawn, Ms. Walker, would you like to start?
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. I am LaShawn Walker, and I'm Director of Community Affairs for 5 Point Communities. And I'm excited to be a part of this conversation about sustainability. And I want to, when we get rolling a little bit, I'll go back into those slides and talk about this this support and this building at Newcomb that we've been able to so gratefully choose Urban Ed Academy to be a tenant as part of our community benefit strategy that I'm directly responsible for. So I'll stop there and we'll come back to it, I'm sure.
Thank you, LaShawn and Natalie.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Natalie Wilson here. I'm an associate partner at New Schools Venture Fund, and I'm a part of our diverse leaders team where we're really focused on advancing Black and Latino leadership and diversifying the teaching workforce. So excited to partner with Urban Ed and be one of their investors this year, and have been really impressed with the work done over the year.
Thank you, Natalie. I think we will actually maybe just open up with a broader question, and then we can kind of zoom in over these next 10 minutes or so. I'm sorry. Can we keep it on that slide there? At least, thank you. Let's start with LaShawn, and if you can tell us both, what is your response to this question? What does sustainability mean to you, and specifically, what does it mean to you when it comes to African-American led nonprofits?
Yes. So like Natalie and like her, the New Schools Venture Fund, 5 Point has been a supporter of Urban Ed Academy and the work, and very intrigued by this idea of moving from the Saturday school to the on to the during the week strategy, and most importantly, and this idea of recruitment of teachers and housing. That's where the sweet spot for us, because we're a master plan communities developer. And so when we talk about sustainability, yes, we're a funder, and we have talked a lot about what it means to sustain nonprofits, even pre-COVID, particularly Black-led ones, any nonprofits, but particularly Black-led ones. We're always sort of robbing Peter to pay Paul, if people know that metaphor. Our organizations are always having to do that. And so to be in a position to provide funds for Urban Ed, and to be really working with you on not just a grassroots fundraising strategy for your organization, but doing the kind of fundraising that will last into the future, well beyond you, is conversations that we're excited to be a part of. But for me, as a real estate professional, as a developer, everything that anyone does in this world, from my humble, not so humble perspective, is connected to real property at some point, right? And so when I'm talking about sustainability, for me, whether we're talking about helping homeowners, like you talk about the single family homeowners in the community and helping to support both them and the teachers, but really when we talk about long-term sustainability, it means being connected to real property. But pre-COVID, for our nonprofits, that means we have to make access to real property affordable, which is why this property at Newcomb, as part of our community benefit strategy, we offered it to you as a tenant with a lease with an option to buy, and making it approachable. Those kinds of opportunities have to be available for nonprofits. And so people who are positions like mine and the organization that procured the tenants, we have to be open to strategies like that, leases with options to buy.
Thank you, LaShawn. Natalie, what would you give us on sustainability in Black nonprofits?
Yeah, I appreciate that. That was definitely a push and something I hadn't thought about, LaShawn. So when we think about it, where we support a lot of early stage entrepreneurs and ventures in education focused work. And oftentimes when I think of sustainability, I think about, do you have the ability to dream and budget for and envision the future for your organization, not just today, but several years out? And a lot of that comes down to, do you have the capital to do so, right? And so we think about it in terms of, do you have diversified revenue streams? Are you relying too heavily on philanthropy? Are you relying too heavily on government funding? But do you have this kind of diversification of the money that's coming in, and is it long term? Are you able to really think towards the future and envision a future of growth for the organization?
But they work together. I agree with you,
Yeah.
Natalie, that
Yep.
they work together, because without that diversification and long-term thinking and long-term strategizing about sustainability for your organization in terms of its finances, then there's no way you can think about real property access or acquisition. It's not even in the realm of your thinking, no matter how low the fruit hangs from the tree, no matter what the property owner does in terms of lease with an option to buy. If your funding is not diversified, and you don't have enough of it, then there's no way to think about real property acquisition.
And thank you both for that. And then obviously, I am biased. I've been a part of this story that, and part of the points that you both have been making here. But, we've seen, all of our experiences, we've seen not so great, unfortunate circumstances for Black leaders, Black nonprofits. And there's been, I think, maybe a different version of sustainability, maybe a different side of the spectrum of sustainability we've seen for some Black groups that have been around for 25, 30, 35, 40 years. Can you tell us what, in your experience, has sustainability looked like for Black leaders, and what in the quote unquote successful Black nonprofit that's been around for over the years?
Natalie, you want to take a stab at that one first, and then I'll come back behind you.
Sure, sure. And so I think for me, what I've seen is, I hate to make the same point. It is that diversification, because we see right now that there are a lot of funders that might be shifting their strategies, right? And so if you're expecting to get funding from a certain philanthropy and that doesn't come through, knowing that you have money coming from other sources, whether that's an earned revenue strategy you have or some government contracts that you expect to stay steady. So just really thinking about where the funding is coming from and making sure you have investments that are long-term and not just short-term. So it's that like long-term thinking that I think is one thing that's needed. And in terms of the fields and what I've seen for Black-led orgs that have been sustainable, I think there's more work that, there's a lot of white papers that have been out there and research that shows that Black leaders are not getting the same level of capital, and they're not getting the same unrestricted capital. And so there's work for the field to do, and it's part of what, we want to do at New Schools and why we're invested in Black and Latino leadership specifically. And we just need more of that. We need more dollars, bigger dollars, year-over-year dollars, multi-year dollars going to Black-led organizations. And that's something that I want to see more of and hoping to be a part of.
Well, I mean, I think when I think about the organizations that have done really well in terms of longevity and sustainability versus the ones that haven't, I think about the fact that those organizations that have been around and been around well have not fallen victim to the kinds of rhetoric that we hear in white-led organizations about why they don't have African Americans in certain positions of leadership is because they can't find qualified folks to do XYZ. We have to be, it's not that we can't train up folks from the community, but they're already there. We already have master's degree holders and PhD level folks in our communities that have the background, education, and experience and training to provide leadership in our organizations. So we have to bring those people in, just as we rely on and need people's lived experience to serve the clients in any of our organizations. We also have to be as intentional about the kinds of folks that we bring into leadership in our organizations. We got I see some PhD folks in the participants, right? From right here from Hunters Point. So they're here. And we just have to be, those are the kinds of things that keep us, keep the organizations going well beyond the tenure of any one ED.
Right on. And it is less about, revolving them around leaders for sure, and more getting to the institutional level. There's a term I'm learning. I don't know all of the business school speak stuff, but this term around key person risk, and what does it look like to have a personality be your foundation when there's just so much that could change for somebody in their career. Looking at the clock here for this last question, y'all, I would love to get your thoughts on this prompt. We obviously want to try to make big swings at this and go for systems levels change. But really system level change is also just a series of carefully crafted smaller nudges and changes that get made, either approaches, what have you. And looking forward to 2021, what is going to be a priority small nudge that both of you in your seats will like to do to kick off the year and get more Black nonprofits and leaders on this track to sustainability?
No, Nancy, go ahead.
All right, I'll go quick. So one thing is just, like I mentioned, investing in more Black and Latino leaders like yourself. But then I think beyond that, one of the biggest things that we do is the management assistance and technical assistance we provide. And so helping leaders think through what their strategy is, what the work is that they're doing, making sure that they're clearly communicating their impact and supporting them and kind of building their vision. And I know, another thing that brought to mind when we think about sustainability is what does the organization look like? And I know, Randy, you've done some amazing work on over the past year of like really building and putting those structures in place that lead to a long-term growing organization. So that's just one of the things that we'll do is just think more broadly about how do we support and better support Black leaders with that assistance.
So lots of development projects have community benefits agreements or CBAs attached to them. Lots don't, but lots do. And it's becoming more and more commonplace. But one of the things that, and CBAs, they have their own challenges, but one of the things that is beneficial about them is that they're private dollars, right? And you can do things with private dollars that you may not be able to do with other kinds of funds. And so I have the honor and privilege and to be working for a company that understands this, that while we're doing master plan communities, our community benefits agreement dollars, we have the wherewithal to be able to say, we're going to support Black businesses with this. We're going to support Black-led organizations with these dollars. And so we're doing that. If we'll just go back for 1 second, Randy, to the slide that shows the corridor for just a moment. Can we do that, Annalise? So you spoke to this when you introduced this part of the conversation this afternoon, but I just wanted to go back here for just a second as we close. This was not accidental, right? I talked about real estate acquisition and that being about place, but economic development is about placement. So the fact that 1676 Newcomb is where it is, and that this community-based group, as part of these community benefits management, chose this piece of real estate to keep out of speculation, and then chose Urban Ed Academy to be the tenant and the buyer, right, soon, was not accidental. It was intentional, because we're going to be doing this with you, a Black-led organization, and we're looking to do some other things like this, hopefully with some other Black-led nonprofits. And we can do some of that with private dollars in a way that you can't do with other kinds of funding.
Well, we are certainly grateful that both of you had the disposition you have. Thank you both for joining us. And I'm looking forward to updating everyone here next year when we have some bigger, better news to share with the work. Annalise, can you take us to the next slide, please? And for folks, and I just saw one question pop in. I should have said that at the beginning too. Please, as you're thinking of them, pop in the questions. LaShawn and Natalie will both be here with us at the end of the program to answer any questions directed at them. But can you also pop into the chat your answers to these questions? And thinking about your own experiences, what's our number one asset in sustaining more Black leaders in the work, hearing some of what you've heard today? What's our number one threat of losing them to other pursuits? And with that, I think I have the privilege of working with Brother Chris Chapman, Kingmakers of Oakland, on this webinar series, certainly, but on the other side of the bridge here, I'm in awe of the work that they've been able to do from the ground up. And without further ado, I'd like to pass it to Baba Chris.
Right on, Brother Randy. And deep appreciation for Sister LaShawn and Sister Natalie for the work that they do unconditionally to support our legacy and our community around land acquisition and building the capacity of leaders such as ourselves to lead beyond our lifetime, but be able to pass our legacies through our social capital, through our resources and property to the next generation. And so super salute and kudos to you all's leadership and your institutions for supporting brothers like ourselves. And so we'll go ahead and keep this moving. My name is Chris Chapman. I'm actually a product of San Francisco Public Schools, taught in San Francisco. I've worked in Oakland, lived in Richmond, so I really claim the Bay Area, co-founder of Kingmakers of Oakland. Kingmakers of Oakland was born out of Oakland Unified School District, and now we are our own 501c3 and work with school districts across the country to improve educational and life outcomes for African-American students from preschool through 12th grade, while working with cross-functional, intergenerational teams to redesign school districts to create the systems, structures, conditions, and culture that, when sustained, lead to improved educational and life outcomes for African-American students. Next slide, please. Thank you. And without further ado, to give a little texture and to differentiate the way we'd like to engage you all, we'll open with this next video. And I don't know if it's just me, it's glitching on my side. If anyone in the chat, are people able to see this seamlessly, y'all, in the chat? If someone can give me a little real-time feedback, it might be on my side. No sound. We can. No sound. Thank you. Appreciate that. Annalise, if there's anything that we could do, otherwise I'll give it a couple more seconds and we could pivot. For those of you who are interested in, we have a myriad of videos. Uh-oh, here we go.
And equity at its finest. It's important for people that do this work to come with that same sense of urgency.
I know we will have moved the bar to the next level when public schools across the country actually move beyond 10th grade ethnic studies courses or Black History Month to literally rewriting curriculum in this country.
When you see a young king, understand that he's not an N-word. When you see a young king, understand his potential, where you can see how bringing out Black genius works.
Now is the time really to lean into these institutions and rewrite a whole new narrative.
We just wanted to be clear that this is about the love of Black boys. This is about the love of our children. This is about giving our lives as best we can to create a new world for them.
Black boy, better listen close. When your elder speaking, better have the most respect, and I'll teach you how to get it. We ain't always gotta act like opposition. No, I got the wisdom, I'ma share it with you. If my life a movie, once you in the picture, if I got some time, I can kick it with you. Chop it up, tell me what's been on your mind. Pardon my absence, we back on the grind. Get in the jump on them, don't fall behind. Breaking down barriers one at a time. I'll give you the game to strengthen your spine. Aiming for greatness, don't settle for fine. Men on a mission, don't step out of line. Vision is vivid like king in his prime. I got a dream, we all standing divine. Peace in the streets, no heat for police. Mom and pops in love, check cash every money. Work piled up, resume on fleek. Got my passport stamp, motherland next month. Every move that I make ain't average, no. Come now, king, let me sign you up. Built a whole castle for you to run. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, make it happen right here. Like, what is hate for this fire that I bring? What I speak is in my veins, in my genes, right, wrong, stand strong in the scene, in between. What you mean? What you mean? What is hate for this fire that I bring? What I speak is in my veins, in my genes, right, wrong, stand strong in the scene, in between. What you mean? What you mean? I'm king.
Yes. I want to shout out Judd Fleming, Obasi Davis, Amari Chapman. Hey, y'all, in our community work, in this legacy work, whoever controls the narrative has the power. So, and next slide, please. it is important, and one of the drivers of change that we work with public school institutions is moving out of the problem of practice and supporting districts to focus on the promise of practice. We have really normalized failure and mediocrity in public school systems. And so we model a new narrative locally and globally. And so with that being said, that was a nice sizzle reel brought to you by our communications team that gives you a little sense of who we are and whose we are. And so we are going to go deep in the remaining time, really to kind of do a case study around Kingmakers of Oakland, as we are a startup. Y'all, July 1st, 2020, we went from no staff to 7 staff, 10 consultants, and a street team, which I'll talk about. And so one of the things is we're looking about United for Black Educators, nonprofit sustainability for Black leadership, has to do with first you plan your life and then life happens, right? And so it's important for us to think about developing, and Sister Natalie was talking about how New School Ventures Funds works with leaders to develop a strategic plan, the importance of building out a strategic communication plan, the strategy on, it's one thing to talk about a diversified funding portfolio, but what does it look like, feel like, and how do you do that from a leader? Then what are the processes to begin to secure funding? Then how do you initiate a team and begin to develop a team to scale your mission and your vision? And then what is your growth strategy, both locally and globally? And then how are you, from a nonprofit standpoint, developing and growing your board? So we were on that beautiful trajectory last year. And then next slide, please. And then March hit, and the multiple pandemics that we are all really struggling in. And it don't matter if you're in the hills or in the flatlands, east, west, north, or south. We are all trying to figure out what this new normal looks like. So not only do we have the pandemic from COVID-19, but the pandemic that was here before us, that is very much present to us and will continue once we've found the vaccination for COVID-19. And that's the pandemic of structural racism and white supremacy. And so we had developed a full-on plan, and then prior to the pandemic and the acknowledgement of white supremacy and structural racism as a nation. And so we had to level set. Next slide, please. And so one thing that is clear, no matter who you are and whose you are, when you are leading, is that crisis, what happens during crisis, your reflex is you move based on your values and your principles. And so when the crisis hit for us, when we were developing our plan and we were still consultants, we went to our values. And so this is important in the spirit of leading during a time of ambiguity and where many of your partners or your peers are actually having to close their doors. But what was really helpful for us and anchored our innovation and our ideation was knowing that everything that we do was nested in love, that everything that we do was about building will beyond self and thinking about legacy, that everything that we do, and the cure was in this, the cure is in our culture, and part of upsetting the setup in this country in innovating entrepreneurial and intrapreneurial spirit is knowing who you are and whose you are. So understanding African-centeredness drives all that we do. The other piece around our value is that partnership. And we know through Generation Thrive and the Warriors and Kaiser and the work that LaShawn's doing and Natalie's doing and Brother Randy's doing is that we're able to do what we do through support. And that's Ubuntu, which is our African-centered value, not from a capitalistic fraternal sense, but from the sense of we. If my brother's struggling, I'm struggling. If my sister don't have nothing, then I don't have nothing. So how do we look to each other? And this is the challenge of philanthropy, because many times it puts us kind of competing against one another in a way that is not our number one value and that is king-centeredness. So knowing that our work as Kingmakers of Oakland, that ultimately the ideation, the innovation, and the acceleration of all this is our kings are on the boardroom, are in the classroom, are at the table, the design table, driving this process. And so when the pandemic hit, we really look to our young people. The next slide, please. So knowing our values are, and these are principles that drive all of our actions as an organization, knowing that the work as entrepreneurs is interpersonal work of self, but also as we calibrate in building out our internal capacities and understanding of who we are, there's also the interpersonal work. And so what drives Kingmakers of Oakland, in particular times of crisis, are these principles rooted in unconditional love, that history and historical context matters, that radical inclusion, that nothing about us without us. And if we're gonna impact the needs of Black children, then Black children and Black families have to be at the boardroom, in the boardroom. They have to be at the decision making. They have to be able to influence budgets and all of these different aspects. And that process is the product, not the traditional metrics that we use in these systems of oppression that further support some and further marginalize others, that it's introducing liberatory processes that really is what we should be tracking during times of crisis, which requires that we have to design from the margins, that we have to start with ourselves, that the higher you go, the more you have to cede power and let go, that you have to make the invisible visible. And all of this work, in particular dismantling public school systems, really is about developing a conspiracy of care. So how are we building care and will beyond self or beyond our clique and block, but collectively, how do we get all of us to organize in such a way that is changing these systems beyond the individual? And then speak the future and design from the future. Next slide, please. Thank you. So on this slide, those values and those principles that I referenced gave birth to the young group of folks you see with their fist up. Those, we created a street team. When districts were closing in March and we're figuring out what distance learning from March to even June looked like, sound like, we went to our young people. Our young people then constantly engaging in listening campaigns of what their needs were and what were the needs of our kings and queens in the greater Bay Area. They informed us on, if you want to engage young people, have music. If you want to engage young people, leverage social media. If you want to engage media, have young people engaging young people. And so one of the things that we need to think about in this moment in time of remaining relevant is not talking at or giving youth something after it's been fully baked, but allowing our youth to design, inform, and lead us on what does leading in a time of multiple pandemics look like, feel like, and sound like. And so our kingmakers, heroes, and sheroes are really these young brothers and sisters that you see in this picture. And so I want to acknowledge them. The ways that we build will is through our music. We have two extraordinary soundtracks. And so I want to acknowledge that every movement has to have a soundtrack, and we have to counter the prevailing narrative of doom and gloom to a narrative of promise, of hope, of aspiration. And so that's why being in the midst of LaShawn, Natalie, Randy, and the Generation Thrive team gives me hope. Next slide, please. So another forefather, extraordinary leader in our movement, Brother Malcolm X. I, for one, believe that if you give people a thorough understanding of what confronts them and the basic causes that produce it, they'll create their own program. And when the people create a program, you get action. So I'm not looking to philanthropy to fix or solve. I'm not looking to any one entity other than who we are and whose we are, our community. My brother Sean Dove always talks about the Calvary is not coming to save anyone. We are those enchanted people that we've been waiting on. We must look to each other, right? And the thing that divides us is not and separates us and challenges us are not the resources, but the we sources. It's will and it's organization. Next slide, please. Now is the time to activate and draw on the fortitude of our ancestors to remember who we are. Listen, we have to remind ourselves during these pandemics that our ancestors dealt with far more with far less. So when we're figuring out ways, look to Baldwin. Let's look to Martin Luther King. Look to Frederick Douglass. Look to Marcus Garvey. Look to Dolores Huerta. We have to look to our history and her story. Those are where the answers lie, and it gives us hope when we lose hope in these moments of confusion, of desperation, of challenge. We have to look to our history, and it can no longer be a mystery. And this is what public school does very well for Black, brown, and indigenous youth, is we don't know who we are. So we don't have access to the genius that allowed our civilization, African civilization, to influence this planet in such a way that we know how to take our crown out of our pocket and rock it on our head, and how to access the social capital that we have access to. And so I want to, in closing, leave us with a few things in the spirit of what I've been learning as a 52-year-old, moving from an educator, an entrepreneur, now to an entrepreneur. These are things that I would just offer on my journey of considerations for Black nonprofit leadership in this moment. One, root yourself back into what matters most. Make your purpose popular. A young king, I was on this Young Man Rumble conference last week, and a king from, this king Cole Carmen from Sacramento said, you gotta make your purpose popular. So rooting yourself into what matters. This is lifestyle work. This is purpose work. We have to align our passion with our purpose, with our profession. Two, get clear about what actually matters to you, right? This is a movement. And in movement building, you don't clock in and you don't clock out. It's 24/7, 365, but nested in mindfulness, nested in brotherhood and sisterhood and community, right? We can't do this at the expense of our livelihood either. So I'm also suggesting that as you align your passion and purpose, you also have to make sure you're taking care of yourself. Three, how do you leverage opportunities and resources in ways that allow us to advance our mission? Four, our role is to educate the funder to help them help us. All money ain't good money, and you got to keep it 100. Philanthropy, we will always leverage reparations money. And philanthropy, that is reparations money. They should and continue to pay into 40 acres plus interest. But we then have to stand in our truth and purpose and be intentional and unapologetic around the needs of Black children, a Black family, Black community, to help them help us. But when we're scared, or if we don't want to speak that truth because we feel that we might not get that money, then they're not worthy of giving that money to us as well. So it really requires us to speak truth to power. And that means knowing who you are, whose you are, standing in value and principle. The next one, ask for what you need and stay in the driver's seat. What I have learned is white entrepreneurs ask for way more, don't have the track record or the experience, and get more. But those of us of color don't ask for what we need because we don't think we can get it, and we have far more expertise and experience. That has to change. This is a transition moment. We must leverage this moment in order to build infrastructure. And I say that in the spirit of and capacity and self-sufficiency. Our work is about legacy building. Listen, philanthropy funds things in 3 to 5 years. If we're not thinking about diversifying our portfolio, when philanthropy goes, right now it is Black Lives Matter, it's around racial equity and healing, it's around anti-racism. That may last for a few more years. Hopefully it lasts into perpetuity. But we have to leverage this influx in resources to build capacity, to generate new revenue streams. So when they fund other things, we are not falling by the wayside, but we continue to innovate and we fund each other. Develop a diversified funding portfolio. Natalie talked about that. Don't have all your eggs in one basket, because when that funding goes, your organization goes. Ubuntu. Remember, power and partnership. We go farther, faster together. Don't hate, collaborate. We got to lift as we climb. And the last one I'll leave, and then I'll pass it back to my brother Randy. It is not a time for us to play small. We have to play big. And in knowing who you are, our forefathers and foremothers did not sacrifice all of their love, genius, and life for us to get in here and keep our crowns in our pockets. We need to rock our crowns, and however we show up, and speak truth to power, and know that, we are the change that we've been waiting for, and it's really up to us. And so thank you for the opportunity to speak and share a few things. We can go to the next slide. I know our time is limited, but we'd like to give some opportunity for some question and answers. And I'd love my brother from another mother, Brother Randy, to come on back to the screen. And maybe if there are any questions in the chat, you could help me monitor them before we close out.
Yes, sir. First, just we give some virtual snaps for Brother Chris, please. Y'all know we can't see everyone, but thank you, brother, for putting it down. And thank you for walking your journey, because we have an example now of what this can look like. The one question I did see, or we just got one that popped in, how do you deal with white folks appropriating Black culture and exploiting Black students? As a broad question, I guess it would be for Brother Chris, LaShawn, or Natalie. Any of you all want to take a first swipe at that?
Well, I mean, I'll just a quick sprinkle. We just got to speak truth to power. And so, I mean, I think we need white people to be exactly who they are. So when they are exploiting, or they are not understanding the complexity, we have enough relationship where we can share that with them, right? I think we have to be careful of calling folk out and then they're on the defense, and then they don't learn and they continue doing what they're doing. So it is, how do we build relationship to the degree we can be exactly who we are, knowing we are all on a journey of personal transformation. So we have to be able to be in right relationship to speak truth to power, but that needs me to be able to not put my crown in my pocket and think, oh no, I can't say nothing to that senior person or that senior program officer. They need me to speak truth, and for them and for their institutional role. So I would just say, just calling it as, speaking truth, telling them.
I'd agree with that on speaking the truth. And then the only thing I would add, Chris, to that is, I think to the point you made earlier about the narrative and the sequencing of that narrative, and that to the winner goes the spoils of being first, basically, and not having narratives drawn up for you, forced upon you, foisted upon you, requires a level of capacity, requires a level of stability that I think a lot of smaller nonprofits, Black-led nonprofits, don't always necessarily have. And so to the question about how we avoid the appropriation of Black culture, I think you can avoid that by being the first to claim that narrative and to set it, such that it's no longer a Black culture narrative. Now it's a best practice narrative.
That's right.
Oh, that group that's led by a Black man, Black woman, was wildly successful first. So now we can't talk about the appropriation of it being, limited to a racial or ethnic piece. It's about who's getting it done, and so that's I would add that. We had another question from a little earlier. What are your plans to? Excuse me, Ms. LaShawn, would you like to respond as well? I think we got you.
The only thing I was going to add is that there's a fantastic sister, Professor Loretta Ross, who's teaching at Smith. and she's done a lot of writing around calling people in as opposed to calling them out.
Ashe.
And the importance of allyship, because we need allies.
That's right.
We need allies, right? Of all matter of hue of person, right? To do what it is all of us are saying we need to get done in our community. We need to be leaders, we need to be first. I agree with everything you guys are saying, but we'd also need allies. And because when in the development world, we can't do anything without partnerships of all types. And so just Professor Ross, this is Sister Sharp, and she's just talking about how you have conversations that aren't about canceling culture, right? And even when people are saying things that they shouldn't, how we as sophisticated and elevated beings can call people in as opposed to calling them out. So I'm not a school person anymore. I used to be, but I know that that works wherever you are.
You were just doing some teaching right there, Sister LaShawn, so thank you. Natalie, you want to bring your voice in, Queen? Would love to hear just your thoughts, reflections.
Sure, yeah. I think I see there's a question in the chat about empowering younger Black leaders to continue this work and prepare them for the challenges that come along with it. And that's something we think about a lot. And I think part of it is just connecting them with folks like you, right? Who've been there, who've stumbled, have you know, grown strong organizations. And so something that we think about a lot is like, how do we extend the network? And then how do we share those lessons learned? I love the slide that you shared around, you know, here are the things you need to do. And I think we hit on a lot of the same points, because I think there's just so much learning and value in talking to someone who's been through it. So appreciate you sharing that.
Right on, Tom. I just want to sprinkle a little piece. We have to be aware of token leadership of young people, right? Like, for example, Kingmakers of Oakland, for every person over 25 on our board, we have somebody under 25. That Kings, our Kings have seats at the board, senior leadership, and like making sure that they have authentic opportunities to lead and be familiar with these places and spaces. So just open it up, you know, at all of our spaces. Every time we get into these extraordinary, you know, high level little pinky rooms where people are, you know, networking, we should have a king or queen right by us so they get comfortable with that space. But just being really intentional and unapologetic and scaffolding that at every level. Young people should be the co-conspirators, the co-designers, the co-creators, because ultimately, and blessing to all of us, the folks that are going to really lead this next journey won't be us. It's going to be those 15 to 25-year-olds who are out on the streets when protesting on behalf of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And you all might have been out there too, but I just say that to say that it is that next generation that are going to take it to the next level. So I appreciated that question. And I realized, Randy, we're a little over.
We are, but by seconds. I actually think we did a great job. And there's another question around how the Warriors and other corporations can support the work. But I think that actually maybe is a good cliffhanger to January, because there's always going to be more. We all have a fantastic year ahead of us, or fantastic opportunity for work ahead of us. Thank you all for being with us today. I think I would like to echo the theme I heard around diversifying the pot. You know, we want to make sure that this isn't just one effort, one benefactor that's doing it. It is going to take a village, and I'm grateful to be alongside Kingmakers here, and being examples of what this work can look like in a place like the Bay Area during a time like the one we're in. We will make sure we share our date for January. If we can go to the next slide, Annalise. Our date for January is yet to be set, but we are so grateful for you all to join us now, join us on the 19th. Really looking forward to rounding this out. And our calls to action, you know, in line with both of the missions of our organizations, is one is to teach. If you have the capacity, I think we think everybody is a teacher. And two, ask a Black man to teach. There are plenty of spots that will be open once the world comes back to normal. And with any other closing thoughts from our team here?
Queens, LaShawn, any closing thoughts? Or Natalie, any closing thoughts?
Just thank you. Just thank you to everyone. Thank you to you, and thank you to the sponsors, and thank you to being with me, Natalie, and me with you. I feel honored to be in your company. But there's a lot riding on the success of Urban Ed Academy and the success of Kingmakers of Oakland. Just like you said, Chris, we're waiting to see. We're waiting to be a part of what these young kings and queens do. So we're supporting them because we're waiting on them.
Ashe. Well, thank you all so much again. Have a great week, a great holiday break, whichever holiday that is that you're celebrating. And how we closed out last time? Oh, Wakanda forever.
Wakanda forever. Thank you, Generation Thrive, Urban Ed, Kaiser, Golden State Warriors, and Kingmakers of Oakland. Appreciate you all.